Welcome to class today, geometry students. Hope you guys are ready for a weekend. I'm sure you're always ready for a weekend, so thankfully it's a Friday. And hopefully you're ready to work hard today and learn some math. Today's video is going to be pretty short actually, and I'm sure you're starting to cheer as soon as I say that. But today's video will not be that long. I want to give you a couple thoughts about proving triangles congruent, and I pretty much want to turn you loose, and I want you to really, let me put one more really in there, really work on your homework diligently and get some practice from there, because I don't think you need a lot of teaching today. The two thoughts are pretty simple. I think you just need to practice, and if I can give you some extra time in class, it will help you not have as much homework over the weekend. So the video is not going to be that long, so grab your books, your pencils, your notebooks, and let's get ready to look at some announcements here and then take some notes for a little bit. Okay, here we go. Quiz Wednesday. There will be a quiz next Wednesday, so make sure you're ready for that. You owe me homework from yesterday, Thursday. Now, you might have finished it in class, and if you did, you might have turned it in. But if you did not turn it in, please do so now. All right, so turn your homework in. And then I'm going to pass out and go over your tests on Monday. Now, you hopefully know by now. I told you on Monday your tests were graded and all that stuff. If you need to know, I wanted you to know your grades. It's your job to do that. I cannot pass the tests out when someone hasn't taken it, and I don't feel very comfortable reading to you the scores over a video. And so your test scores have been posted at Sycamore since this past Sunday. So if you want to know what you made, look at Sycamore, and I will go pass out your tests on Monday, and we'll go over those on Monday. So quiz on Wednesday, please turn in yesterday's homework, and I will be going over your tests on Monday. All right? Do not write this down, just listen. Remember, the other day I explained that we would be looking at 5 ways to prove triangles congruent. In this chapter, we're going to be looking at 5 ways. Remember, we looked at 2 of those 5 ways on Wednesday. Side, side, side was one way we learned, and side, angle, side was the other way that we learned to prove triangles congruent. Today we will be looking at 2 more ways to prove that triangles are congruent. And here are those 2 ways. Angle, side, angle is one way, and angle, angle, side is another way. So these are the 2 ways that we're going to study today. Now again, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be an amazingly short video, and I want you to spend most of your time working on your homework. However, the opposite of this is true for the homework. The homework is rather long and difficult, so you're going to have to work in class and watch the video and really pay attention to do well on your homework, okay? So these are the 2 ways we're going to look at today. Angle, side, angle, and angle, angle, side. Would you please copy this heading down? Today we are going to look at proving triangles congruent by ASA and AAS. The lesson number is lesson 5.3, and I hope you're big on writing down the date. I feel like that's important. Today's date is the 25th, 10/25/13. 10/25/13. Proving triangles congruent by ASA and AAS. Okay? All right, let's continue on. Copy this in your notes if you would, please. Postulate 14, the ASA postulate. If 2 angles and the, important word, very important word, included side, we'll talk about what that means later. If 2 angles and the included side of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles and the included side of a second triangle, then the 2 triangles are congruent. All right? If 2 angles and the included side of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles and the included side of a second triangle, then the 2 triangles are congruent. Now, I would like to strongly recommend that you write down this example right here. Please draw a triangle that looks like that and a triangle that looks like that, if you would, please. let's call these triangles triangle ABC and triangle DEF. Now, please watch this carefully. If I told you that this angle here was marked congruent to this angle here, actually don't do that. Would you erase that? Let's use numbers, please. Would you erase that? Let's say we have 30 degrees here, and let's say we have 30 degrees here, okay? And let's say this angle up here is 85 degrees, and this angle over here is 85 degrees. Now, would you please watch this carefully? Notice it says if we have how many angles? 2. Well, we do. We have an angle congruent to an angle and an angle congruent to an angle. Do you see that okay? So it says if we have 2 angles and the included side congruent to 2 angles and the included side. So if these are my 2 angles I'm dealing with, what do you think the included side would be? Well, it's going to be this side right here between those 2 angles. It's not going to be this side over here. That side is not between these 2 angles. It's not going to be this side here. That side is not between those 2 angles. The only angle, the only side that's between these 2 angles is this side right here. So when we're talking about angle, side, angle, it must look like this right here. Do you see that okay? It must be an angle, then a side, and then an angle. I hope that makes sense. That's the only way, students, that you have angle, side, angle. So whenever we have 2 angles, 1, 2, let's call this here a length of 8, and we'll call this side a length of 8. So whenever I have 2 angles and an included side congruent to 2 angles and an included side in this triangle, then I can definitely state beyond the shadow of a doubt that these 2 triangles are congruent. Now, sorry about that. Now, understand that we could also use, I'm going to go ahead and erase the letters here. We could also use symbols like this. We could have a slash here and a slash here, and then a slash here and a slash here, and then 2 here and 2 here. And that would be angle, side, angle, congruent to angle, side, angle. And thus we could state these 2 triangles are congruent. I'm not trying to rush through a video by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just trying to make this simple and then say, hey, let's get to work on your homework. So instead of sitting there and listening to me teach, you can get some homework done and you can learn by practicing. And whenever we can do that, I like to do that. I feel like you learn math a lot better by doing than listening, okay? So hopefully this makes sense. If not, you might want to back it up and listen to it again. But if 2 angles and the included side of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles and the included side of another triangle, then those 2 triangles are congruent. We call that angle, side, angle. Now, would you please copy down Theorem 5.1? Angle, angle, side theorem. Angle, angle, side. AAS. If 2 angles and a, important word, non-included side. So if I have 2 angles and a non-included side of one triangle congruent to 2 angles and the corresponding non-included side of a second triangle, then the 2 triangles are congruent. Now please take some really good notes. I believe that's the last slide. Yeah, it is. So I'm going to explain this to you, and then you're ready to start your homework. And you should be thankful for that and try to get as much done as possible in class. But listen, let me explain to you what this means. So pay really close attention if you would, okay? I'm going to copy this real quick. And we're going to use the same triangle over here. All right, so in your notes, if you would please, let's go ahead and draw 2 triangles that look something like this. And we're going to call them GHI and JKL. Okay? GHIJKL. Now, students, watch this carefully. If two angles, let's go ahead and call this again 28 degrees. Write that down, please. And 28 degrees. And we'll call this 85 degrees. Copy that down, please. And 85 degrees. And then it says, so look, if two angles, so look, I've got an angle here and an angle here congruent to an angle here and an angle here. So far, so good. If two angles and, look at this, students, a non-included side. Well, we know this is the included side. So a non-included side must be either this side here or this side here, because we know this side here is what we call the included side. So let's talk about this for a second. To be honest with you, it could be either one of those two sides. Either one of those two sides are your included sides, so you could say either one of those. Let me quickly erase this. Sorry about that. I know I'm kind of talking slow here. Okay, so let's say we have these two angles congruent, and let's say we have GI congruent to JL. Well, there we go. That's angle, angle, side. Angle, then an angle, and then a side. Jess, you did hear me, didn't you? Okay. And then an angle, and an angle, and a side. Look at that. So angle, angle, side, congruent to angle, angle, side. That's what we call AAS. Now another non-included side would be this side here. And that's still angle, angle, side. Look, angle, angle, side, congruent to angle, angle, side. There we go. And you could state that these two triangles are congruent. Do you see it? This is the included side. It's between the two angles. And these two sides here are what we call the non-included side. Okay? So you could also use symbols. You can take some notes here, or just sit back and watch and listen, whatever you want to do. But we could say this angle here is congruent to this angle here, and this angle here is congruent to this angle here. Now look, if I said this side is congruent to this side, then that would not be angle, side, angle. That would be, well, that would not be angle, angle, side. It would be angle, side, angle, congruent to angle, side, angle. But how about if I said this side here is congruent to this side here? Then I would have angle, angle, side, congruent to angle, angle, side. So thus I could state that these two triangles are congruent. Or to be honest with you, this here is also a non-included side between these two angles, and this side here is also a non-included side between these two angles. So I could say angle, angle, side, congruent to angle, angle, side. And so the two triangles are congruent. Now one more thought, and this thought's definitely going to be confusing, but if you'll pay attention, I think you'll get it. Now, be careful on this one. It looks like the two triangles are congruent because, look, I have angle, angle, side, congruent to angle, angle, side. Do you see that? But notice this keyword corresponding. The non-included side of one triangle is congruent to two angles and the corresponding non-included side. Do you see how it goes angle, angle, side? And then notice I started with the one slash, angle, angle, side. So if you start with a single slash here, it would be angle, angle, and this side. This side here corresponds with this side here. So you got to make sure that the side that's congruent matches the other side from the other triangle that should be congruent. So it'd have to be here. Now we have angle, angle, side, congruent to angle, angle, side. And that would be Aas theorem, angle, angle, side. And yes, we could definitely state that these two triangles are congruent. So with that in mind, there's your homework. Please copy this down. Please get started. You know exactly what the video is. It's no different than any other day. It's Geometry 5.3 homework. Geometry 5.3 homework. Here's your homework assignment. This homework is due on Monday, so please work on it over the weekend if you don't finish in class. I fully expect you to finish most of it in class, maybe not all of it, most of it, and then finish it over the weekend and turn it in on Monday, okay? Have a great weekend, and hopefully this is making sense. If you need any help at all, call or email, okay?